Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd like to invite Lou Feldman first, who will do a brief introduction, and then Brian Helm on the proposed project.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the governing board. Lou Feldman is here on behalf of the Boulder Bay project. Again, it's been a long, winding road. At this point, though, I do want to thank David Landry, who has worked hard on this project. And although not here, Cole Rinkey has certainly spent a considerable amount of effort working with us on the revisions to the supplement agreement, and her efforts are much appreciated. The jury wrote, thank you, Dave, but Jerry has always been a level head, and his work on this project is certainly appreciated. And of course, the director's efforts. I thought Rob did an excellent job of running through the environmental issues, and he certainly had enough comments to respond to keep him busy after the last several months. And last but not least, the oil opposition. We have interacted with them for some considerable period of time. Their input has influenced and shaped the project as it has evolved. And since this was rolled out early on as a CPP project, the idea of consolidating development in the urbanized areas has fostered a very healthy and vibrant debate. The consolidation of development in urban areas is evolution in my mind, and what we have seen, and you can walk out the front door here and observe is strict commercial development, standalone motels, and kind of single-purpose gaming facilities about midway useful lives. In order to be competitive and change the built environment, creating a multitude of moonlight generators is really essential to have a project that is not only implementable and financeable, but to deliver the economic and environmental benefits that I think most of us want to see in place. It never occurred to me that if we had this conversation, that this project would be the most closely watched project since probably since I've been doing this, and that's a long time. A confluence of events has certainly highlighted the significance of today's decision. And I think in connection with the deliberations, it's important to understand who Boulder Bay is and what they are trying to accomplish. Boulder Bay is a company that's owned by a local family who are present today. Roger Whitford, his wife, and daughter Heather. Roger is a successful environmental scientist. He invented and brought to market Trex building materials. He invented COSA building insulation, which reduces loss of voltages. He's currently involved in another recycling enterprise, creating fabric and upholstery from recycled materials. Roger is an environmentalist. And it's Roger's vision that Boulder Bay will be the greenest hospitality project, certainly of our time. Really the question for the agency is, does the proposed transformation of this casino-centric outdated business model to a green, amenitized destination resort focusing notably on health and wellness, which is one of the three legs of the stool of the I think broadly supported prosperity plan, which features an abundance of on-site recreation and a significant decrease in the emphasis on gaming. Are those combination of elements worthy of your approval? And we always have this unpleasant conversation because what happens if you don't do that? And that is maintenance of the status quo. Status quo in Tahoe is not pretty. The status quo in Tahoe is over 17% unemployment, lost over 7,000 jobs in the last 10 years, population decreased up to 15% basin-wide, 80% of the Latino population living at the top poverty level, hotel occupancy below 25%, enrollment in K through 12 down by 35%, school closures, and of great significance, perhaps most relevant here, the science tells us that 72% of the pollutant load is coming from the urban uplands, the town centers, places like the Tahoe Biltmore, and the status quo is our enemy. That's what perpetuates the loss of clarity. By rolling out the CEP, TRPA endeavored to be proactive and incentivize property owners to come forward with projects that over-deliver. On the environmental side of the equation, trying to induce environmental innovation with deliverables in exchange for certain development bonuses. Quite frankly, Boulder Bay did not need to be part of this contract. The existing code and regional plan had opportunities for this project to proceed. This seems to be an appropriate place for Boulder Bay to be measured by over-delivery. I believe Boulder Bay has indeed met this challenge. Brian Helm, our project manager, is going to walk you through the proposed project and familiarize you with the elements that we think overwhelmingly demonstrate advancement on threshold attainment. And at the conclusion of Brian's comments, because we have a contentious project, I need to make a couple of comments about the height amendment and perhaps address the baseline. That will conclude our presentation, and you can have lunch and we'll leave you alone. So with that said, please introduce Brian Helm.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Brian Helm, and I'm the project manager for the Boulder Bay redevelopment project. I'm here today representing the Whitberg family and their proposal for the redevelopment of the Tahoe Biltmore Hotel. Mr. Whitberg and his family, after having completed, as Lou mentioned, a long and successful career in the recycling and sustainable building products industry, began this project not really as a developer, but more as a local. And a local who was concerned that the North Shore of Lake Tahoe and the Crystal Bay Casino Port did not need to remain an economic and environmental blight on the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. We started with an understanding of why we all choose to live here and why so many people from all over the world come to visit is because of the recreation, the outdoor, and the scenic beauty of where we all live. We understand that the property, or we believe that the property that we currently own, the Tahoe Biltmore, stands in direct conflict with those values and beliefs. And not to mention the 9 key environmental thresholds put forth by TRPA. The scientists today are very clear. They're telling us that the existing built environment, which was put in place largely during the early to mid-1900s, is the primary driver of environmental decline at the top. It's pushing us further and further away from attainment. We must, it is no longer enough to close our eyes, hold our breath, and hope that the thresholds attain themselves. We must pursue sustainable and significant on-the-ground solutions to reverse that trend. As you just heard from both Rob and David, the proposed project, which is before you, is consistent with the TRPA regional plan, is consistent with the North State Line community plan, over-delivers upon the community enhancement program, and proposes an amendment to code which furthers the attainment of thresholds. With that in mind, I'd like to provide you with a bit more information about the existing conditions as well as the proposed project to aid your decision-making. The North State Line Community Plan is approximately 48 acres and encompasses the gaming and motel area on the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. Within our community plan today, while it's a little tough to see it on the slide in front of you, we have 2 motels, 2 hotels, a bed and breakfast, with approximately 440 rooms currently for rent today. There's an additional 125 bank tourist accommodation units within the community plan. We also have a small condominium complex, 4 casinos with approximately 56,000 square feet of existing gaming floor area, 6 restaurants, 2 concert venues, a small hotel spa, independent fitness center, post office, and a modest amount of office space. In addition, we have over 1,000 parking spaces in both surface and structured parking facilities. In between Crystal Bay and Kings Beach, just a short distance down the road, is the Brockway Springs Resort with an additional 78 vacation hotel rooms for rent on a nightly basis. The current Tahoe Biltmore, as it stands today, is 76 feet tall, Across the street, the Calneva is 122 feet tall, and the Rockaway Springs condominium is approximately 90 feet tall. Interestingly, this is another show about, under the proposed conditions with alternative C, the number of tourist accommodation units within the North State Line Community Plan under cumulative conditions actually goes down from 565 to 518, while and the gaming floor area also is decreased. A little bit more about the document, the plan itself, which makes up the North State Line Community Plan. This document provided the foundation upon which the earliest ideas about our project were conceived. This was a plan which was written by the community and adopted by both Washoe and Placer County as well as TRPA. Stated very simply, the first primary goal of that North State Line Community Plan is to create a more complete, family-oriented destination resort area. These are the exact words of that community plan. In addition of the 90 goals and objectives that are set forth in this community plan, you just heard that the project itself, or the proposal alternative C, will achieve about 77 of those goals. I've identified a few of those here, so you can reflect upon those as we talk about the proposed project. The need to develop a mixed-use family destination resort area, create a pedestrian-oriented environment, increase in retail and dining, providing employee housing on-site and within the community plan area, the screening and parking areas, undergrounding of overhead utilities, and upgrade of the overall aesthetics. And interestingly, the community plan actually targets for an increase in BMT. The proposed project will reduce BMT. Continuing to provide pedestrian paths and bicycle trails, transit service, outdoor plazas, the implementation of environmental improvement projects, the encouragement of on-site recreation, develop landscape open space, and for projects with greater than 70% coverage, to reduce that coverage by 5%. We achieved a 15% reduction. Each and every single one of these objectives are set forth, in that community plan and achieved by the proposed project. With regards to the existing conditions, I wanted to show you a couple of different pictures in terms of where we are in terms of threshold attainment with our existing conditions as they exist today. In terms of water quality, as much as 30,000 pounds of fine sediment run off the site in a wet year. This is due to things like uncontrolled stormwater runoff, uncontained snow storage areas, 60,000 square feet of steep and eroding slopes, limited curb and gutter on our roadways, all of which combine with oceans of asphalt to exceed the TMDL Tier 2 discharge limits by 2 to 10 times, depending on the storm event. Clearly, the existing conditions are having a significant negative impact on the water quality threshold. The story repeats itself with regards to soil conservation. One of the biggest challenges to meaningful addressing water quality in not only this community plan, but also throughout the basin, is the oceans of asphalt and impervious coverage that exists. Within the North State Line Community Plan, we estimate that there's approximately 1.3 million square feet of impervious coverage, of which 430,000 square feet is located within the built-on properties. These pictures, again, tell a story that's repeated all over not only the community plan, but the lake itself. These oceans of asphalt over eroding slopes which provide a perfect storm for sediment, runoff, and environmental damage. In terms of scenic quality, again, the pictures speak for themselves. As we enter into the Crystal Bay, we're greeted by this sign. It's a very telling sign. End of the scenic byway. Clearly, the North State Line Community Plan is not in attainment from scenic quality by any judge of reason. This is due to things like the existing facility, which stands at 76 feet tall, just on top of the right-of-way. It's also due to limited setback and limited areas for pedestrian and landscaping, surface parking, a 65-foot tall neon sign, curb cuts, and limited setback from the side streets, which enter into garbage areas and loading docks. And then as we leave North State Line Community Plan, we begin that scenic byway again. In terms of really the existing conditions from a social and economic perspective, this again is a story that's not just about the North State Line Community Plan, it's about Tahoe County. We're seeing our buildings and our infrastructure decline each and every day. That then leads our businesses to an inability to attract new business and visitors. and reduces the availability of capital to reinvest in our businesses and environmental improvements. This becomes a self-perpetuating cycle that pushes us downward towards unemployment, increases in crime, reductions in tax revenues, and an increased strain on our public services. So you can see very clearly, and as you heard from both Rob and David, the EIS confirms that the existing conditions are having a negative impact on the most critical areas of environmental importance. As such, the Biltmore site produces an ideal location for redevelopment and an ideal location in which to address these challenges head on. It's a 100% previously developed site. It is not virgin land. It's an overcovered area in the middle of an important watershed. It was previously a vibrant tourist area within the urban plan boundary. And it contains a number of aging buildings that have long outlived their useful life and have become energy and water hogs. The next piece of the puzzle I want to take you through is understanding why those existing conditions are failing from a business perspective and connect that to sustainable development. So we already talked about the decline in quality of accommodations and infrastructure, as well as the lack of infrastructure necessary to service that group travel. That then leads to these symptoms. Shoulder seasons and midweek, which are extremely weak, businesses that are overly sensitive to weather and snow, an inability to invest in our businesses, and employment and income, which becomes highly seasonal. During this analysis of the marketplace, we spoke with local resort associations, as well as hospitality and project feasibility professionals, business associations, as well as established hotel operators, to try and understand how we could go from a business model that is failing to one which becomes more sustainable. A high-level summary of this analysis is very easy to understand by looking at the room night breakdown of a sustainable and successful hotel. Contrary to what we all expect, you and I traveling with our families on vacation represents a very small portion of what makes that hotel successful. It's only about 25% of the room nights that we can expect from that hotel. 65% of those room nights are actually represented by group and meeting business. When we look at the travel patterns of that group and meeting business, we see that it becomes a very nice fit with where we are weak and where we are failing at Lake Tahoe. We have an average stay of 3 nights. Stays are concentrated midweek. The demand remains strong during our typically weak shoulder seasons. They're booked far in advance, significantly less sensitive to weather, and more resilient during the outset of economic decline. All places where the existing business model of Lake Tahoe is failing. As we look a little bit further about these guests, we understand that they are already demonstrating a number of the environmentally sensitive behavior which we're trying to encourage at Lake Tahoe today. They're significantly less likely to rent a car. They represent 70% of the existing trips on the North Lake Tahoe shuttle between Reno Tahoe Airport and Lake Tahoe. The majority of their trips and activities are retained on site in group activities, meetings, and events. And when they do take those recreation trips to off-site locations, they're frequently done in groups with alternative transportation opportunities, such as a hotel shuttle. So it became clear to us that we needed to develop a program and a project which was able to attract that type of guest. If we wanted to be successful ourselves, but also we wanted to provide a successful model which all the other small businesses around us to benefit from. And so the room count, the amount of meeting space per room, and the types of amenities and the amounts of amenities all tie back to servicing and becoming that sustainable hotel. Finally, I know you're all familiar with the Prosperity Plan, but I wanted to just briefly touch upon it. This study was done after our project was submitted, but it was encouraging for us to see in that in-depth study conducted by a number of stakeholders around the basin that they also focused on the 3 key areas that we really believe are most important to our project. Obviously, quality visitor and tourism services, an important focus on health and wellness, which is a big part of our amenity package, and then obviously the green building and innovation cluster. So before I go into the actual project details, I wanted to touch on the community outreach process that we never caught on this project. We believe that we have conducted, and this project has conducted, one of the most comprehensive community outreach and listening efforts ever endeavored upon at Lake Tahoe. But the important part is not the number of meetings we had, the number of people we talked to, or for the number of letters we got. It was not a simply check-the-box sort of exercise for us. It led to over 65 meaningful and significant changes to the project. As a direct result of community input, we stand before you today with a completely different project, but also more importantly, a better project. The first round of changes came in May of 2009. Over 40 significant changes were made to public input. We removed 100% of the timeshares from the project. We pulled 114 bedrooms, about 20% of the total bedrooms that we had been proposing off the site. Reduced total building floor area by 20% and retail and commercial by 25%, a significant traffic generator. Removed the full floor from every building except building A, which we removed the full wing of. Completely redesigned all of our architecture for the request of the community. Augmented our water quality and treatment system designed for 100-year storm and to anticipate the above and beyond standards of the TMDL. Introduced an alternative transportation program in partnership with our friends at the Transportation Management Association, and increased the park space by 30%. The results of that effort were very clear. We collected over 640 letters of support, and on the DEIS itself, comments in favor of the project were over 7 more. But we did not stop there. We did not come to you with that project. Once the DEIS process was completed, we didn't just sit back, allow TRPA to respond to comments, and then come to the hearing looking for approval. We once again made meaningful and significant changes to the proposed project that are detailed up here on the slide above. We took another 25 hotel rooms out of the project, further reduced building floor area, further reduced commercial, took another floor off of the highway frontage buildings, revised our affordable housing program to meet Placer County requests, increased setbacks of building A, consistent with the EIS, committed, importantly, I'll talk about this in a minute, committed to providing evidence of construction financing, which will be the first time it's ever been done in the basin, as well as augmented the guaranteed bonds with regards to the water quality program, committed to monitoring of traffic studies, which I'll talk about, the parking management and incentive program, and community advisory committee for construction and operation. All of these are part of our conditional permit or draft permit that's in front of you today. All of these were changes that were made as a direct result of that community outreach process. With regards to the CEP, I know you've heard a lot about it already. I wanted to just explain some of the commitments we're making. We estimate that within the CEP program, at Resolution 2008-11, it adds about $17 to $19 million in incremental costs as a result of the programs that you see in front of you here. The two things that we asked for as part of in consideration of in part of the CEP program was the consideration of our HIDA amendment, as well as 40 tourist accommodation bonus units that would be awarded in the event we restored and eliminated 40 TAU from sensitive land. Today, those bonus tourist accommodation units have an appraised value of about $20,000 to $25,000 per unit. It's about $800,000 to $1 million worth of value, and as you can see, about $17 to $19 million in incremental spend on our behalf. So to orient you to the project itself, within the existing facility, we have about 800 linear feet of pedestrian walk space. This is largely sidewalks along Highway 20. As part of the proposed project, we increased that to over 6,000 linear feet of pedestrian paths that network the site and open areas for walkways. It's over a mile of walkways within the 16-acre site. Next, we had a center turn lane through Crystal Bay to increase the flow of traffic, and we had a half-mile of new bike lanes on both sides of the highway. Next, we had a new TARP bus stop with ticketing and info kiosks, as well as had 2 shuttle stops for connectivity to beach, golf, and skiing. We had neighborhood retail and dining along Highway 28 with pedestrian villas, small coffee shops, small market, family dining, and local retail. And surround that with 2.5 acres of public gathering space, art installation, play areas, etc. We had a 4-acre public park with a 1/5 of a mile interpretive and scenic trail and seating area, which would be built with private dollars and maintained with private dollars, but open to the public. The backbone of the business model is a 275-room LEED Silver Hotel, surrounded by 59 Silver LEED condominiums and 38 affordable housing bedrooms, both on-site and off. In the amenity package, we have 21,000 square feet of meeting space to service that small and medium group business, as well as about 29,000 square feet of spa and wellness center to, again, augment on-site recreation and amenity package. In terms of on-site recreation, we take it from basically nothing today other than a casino to 3 swimming pools, a kids center and daycare, outdoor activity center, small casino, shopping, spa, and wellness center. And then finally, convenient access with direct connect shuttles provided through our alternative transportation program in partnership with public transportation to beach ski areas and all. This last slide was just, again, in terms of providing a comparison for another example around the lake, which you're probably all familiar with. That's the Hyatt Lake Tahoe. I've also provided the middle column, which is the original proposal, and then our final revised alternative C. The Hyatt Lake Tahoe is a 12-story tower. It's approximately 124 feet tall. Has 422 hotel rooms and 62 bedroom timeshare units. It also has 20,000 square feet of casino space, 20,000 square feet of spa space, and approximately 50,000 square feet of meeting space. By comparison, the Boulder Bay project is 30% fewer units, is 40% shorter, and has 50% less casino space. So now I'm talking about the individual environmental thresholds of the individual portions of the above and beyond environmental commitment of the project. The water quality program as proposed by Boulder Bay is the most comprehensive and we believe most effective that's ever been proposed at Lake Tahoe. It goes far beyond the standard 20-year DMP requirements the TRPA has in place today and implements what is known as a low-impact development strategy to meaningfully address the TMDL challenges in front of us all today. The Boulder Bay Stormwater program is based on a very simple concept. The harmful elements of the TMDL are contained in that stormwater that runs off of the site. If you prevent the stormwater from running off the site, you keep the TMDL elements from ever getting to the lake. It's very, very simple. To make sure that we capture all of that water on site, we've designed that stormwater program to address and hold on site the 100-year storm. That's a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring each and every year. As a primary line of defense, we've installed underground infiltration galleries that are sized to accommodate the on-site infiltration of the 50-year storm. We then add a number of redundant, low-impact development strategies that you see up here, such as pervious pavers, green roofs, stormwater catchments, rainwater harvesting, and impervious pavers to decrease the impervious coverage of the site, reduce peak stormwater runoff, and attenuate water in place, thereby effectively treating the 100-year stormwater on site. This just gives an overhead view of how these systems lay out with slope stabilization, rainwater harvest on roofs, green roofs to slow down peak runoff, pervious pavers to infiltrate water in place, a dust to sweeper program to maintain the efficacy of those pervious surfaces, bioretention to actually remove fine sediment in line with our retention galleries, and then that network of retention galleries that you see towards the right. Finally, during the EIS process, I want to go a little depth here, but not too much. We were asked to quantify the benefit of this proposed system because no one had done one before. While they use technologies that are used all over the world with great success, we haven't done one in Tahoe yet, and we were asked to quantify that benefit. This is a model that was developed by Michael Hogan and Dr. Mark Brismer at UC Davis and Integrated Environmental Restoration Services. The model uses independent stormwater data from the Desert Research Institute to develop a robust forecasting tool, similar to the PRLM, which was developed after our project was initiated. It allowed us to look back at 15 years of stormwater data on an individual daily basis to determine the potential loading effects of both wet and dry years. It allowed us to look at our systems in a more realistic fashion than the traditional 20-year hydrologic calculations to understand the cumulative effects of multiple back-to-back storms might have on efficacy and efficiency of those systems as rainwater began to load through retention galleries. The result is above. The TRPA 20-year design standard, if implemented on the existing site, would still lead to about 30,000 pounds of stormwater fine sediment runoff every year. we have 30 to 40 days in which stormwater ran off the site and overwhelmed that system. By contrast, the Boulder Bay project and the proposed 100-year design storm system would reduce that to 3 to 5 days of runoff and approximately 3,500 pounds of fine sediment, or a 90% reduction. To put that in perspective, the TRPA challenges in front of all of us around the lake today has called for a 33% reduction in fine sediment runoff. The next piece is our first environmental improvement project that we will be participating in with Placer County, CTC, Forest Service, and the Nevada Division of State Lands. It's a state-line interflow system which is being led, the environmental documentation and application is being led by Placer County. We have contributed approximately $1.4 million of land and construction costs to complete that upper section. The real punchline of that system is it has a tremendous significant benefit to the lower Rockaway community, and that today, under existing conditions, at the 100-year storm, peak runoff is 25 cubic feet per second at that corner of the state line, and 28. Under the proposed conditions and with this project, that would go to 0. With regards to temporary BMPs, when we purchased the site in 2007, all of the BMPs had not been completed, and we met with TRPA to determine what we should be completing in the interim step in order to meet our requirements. Because we have a site which will be 100% disturbed upon construction of this project, the desire was not to install a number of systems, spend a lot of money on those systems, and then have them torn out what we thought would be 3 years later. That was 4 years ago. But with TRPA and Boulder Bay, in all seriousness, we came to the agreement to maintain the existing BMPs, DI cleanouts, culvert and infiltration cleanouts and augmentation, K-rails installed at the base of all of our eroding slopes, mulching of all our barren soil areas, and boulder barriers in front of illegal parking areas with mulching. In addition to this coming summer we'll continue to refresh this with a third round in on BMPs in anticipation of starting our project next year. Finally, with regards to guaranteeing the implementation and success of these systems, we've gone beyond the typical or standard TRPA requirement of a construction bond on a water quality system. We had 2 additional bonds, and we worked on these with the Attorney General's Office in the state of California. First was a monitoring and verification bond, where we would be monitoring the discharge of our system to make sure we were achieving the goals that you just saw on the previous slide. And in the event that the goals had not been achieved, the money from that bonding system would be used to augment and achieve that system. And then finally, an operations and maintenance bond, which would provide for 5-year operation and maintenance of the system. So you can see very clearly through the TRPA's work with multiple civil and hydrologic studies confirms that not only is there no impact to the water quality threshold, there is a significant benefit to the water quality threshold under the proposed conditions. Soil conservation. Boulder Bay project will reduce coverage by over 1.5 acres versus the existing total. We will permanently retire, and we have committed to permanently retire as a condition of improvement all the excess coverage that we own, about 15% of the coverage within the North State line, within the Boulder Bay project area. This is a project site that is less than 50% covered. So again, very clearly, the reduction results in a significant benefit and furthers the attainment of the soil conservation threshold, according to the TRPA code. By contrast, that existing condition maintains a significant and unavoidable impact on this threshold. Scenic quality. I know we've already talked a little bit. I want to put a little different part of the conversation here. The baseline condition we've all heard is not an attainment. It's a 13.5 versus 15.5. It's due to the existing conditions. The proposed height ordinance seeks to further that scenic quality by implementing the key measures identified by TRPA itself in its 2006 threshold compliance report. The language from that report specifically requested removal of degraded structures, improvement in the architectural quality of new and remodeled structures, an increase in landscaping and open space, a decrease in highway curb cuts, and improved signage. We do all of these things. We're proposing a maximum height less than illegally exists, or that illegally exists today of 76 feet. And we limit that setback limit that height by step backs from the road edge. The buildings are stair-stepped up slope to provide the transition height across the site. Also importantly, with regards to the height ordinances in reference to the recent shore zone rule, the proposed amendment specifically requires the furthering of 4 key thresholds: scenic, soil, water, and air quality. The analysis of the proposed conditions under the amendment to code clearly shows a furthering of the scenic threshold. But if I could digress for 1 second on these elements, why they're important, is that none of these environmental benefits that you see about here that you can judge in the silo, they're all connected. The building footprint's connected to coverage, et cetera, et cetera. It's particularly true in considering the blanket statement that no building at Lake Tahoe should ever be over 32 feet tall leaves an incredible amount of environmental benefits on the proverbial table. Today, when we require all buildings to be 2 stories tall, we automatically prioritize scenic quality at the expense of water, air quality, and soil conservation. If by trading off taller buildings with increases in setbacks, smaller building footprints, fewer building envelopes, we're able to deliver substantial progress towards 4 environmental thresholds, as opposed to just 1 under today's standards. That's not to say that this concept is appropriate for every single site around the basin. We must confirm that the proposed conditions under the different height standards enhances the scenic quality and is not viewable from the lake. But if we're able to show those 2 things, why would we not be open to a building form which requires less coverage and provides more area for walkways and buildings that operate more efficiently? This is an overhead view of the step back of height, which limits scenic visibility from the scenic corridor while ensuring no visibility from the lake. And the result of this step back is the opening of areas for over 1 mile of pedestrian paths, 4 acres of community park and gathering space, and a reduction of over an acre and a half of coverage. Those benefits are not in isolation of what we're proposing with height. They're directly connected to that proposal. I know you've seen these pictures. The one thing I like to just ask the question when we go through these sorts of analysis, and you saw how they were already conducted, is I say, if we had today the Boulder Bay project in place, if Boulder Bay existed today, and I was proposing to build the pictures you'll see at the top of the building, would you let me do it? And if the answer to that question is no, then there's a scenic improvement to the proposed conditions. So let me walk you through some of these photos. Here's the billboard today, transitioning to the lower heights along Highway 28, and then the taller buildings, which aren't even visible because of the step back in height, and we move it back on the site. This is standing across the street at the Crystal Bay Motel area. And again, opening up those areas for landscaping and having a visual perception of those taller buildings that measure 75 feet tall line up to the 2-story structures on site today. And then that park again. And then here's that visibility from Lake Tahoe. Really no change to that. Our second environmental improvement project is a public-private partnership with Washoe County. It was completed in 2009. It was the undergrounding of over 2,500 feet of overhead utility wires, both Placer County and Washoe County. The additional changes that we already talked about was the removal of 1-4 for both G and H. We believe that will further improve the scenic quality of the area, reduces on-site building floor area, opens up the view of a ridgeline that was previously blocked by the Tahoe Biltmore structure, and is consistent with adjustments to affordable housing as requested by Placer County. So again, by a test of reason as well as scientific approach, the proposed project will significantly enhance and further the scenic threshold. That's my biggest fan. With regards to the air quality component of this project, it's just important to the health of the environment is the outside and the scenic perspective of the structures, but also the guts of the building. We have a habit here in the basin of treating a hotel room that was built in 1950 The same way we build same as we treat a hotel that's built in 2011 with LEED standards and all the environmental technology and bells and whistles that go with it to dramatically reduce energy and water use. By and large, the primary infrastructure that's in place today is exactly that former structure I talked about. Single pane windows, lack of insulation, inefficient HVAC systems. According to the U.S. Green Building Council, the built environment, or buildings, account for about 40% of the total carbon dioxide emissions in this country. That's more than transportation, that's more than industrial sectors. It's critical that we recognize and address this problem, which is kind of a hidden problem as you drive by these structures, in terms of addressing environmental benefits of the lake. We work with our engineers, environmental engineers at Arup Engineering to apply a LEED Silver building program, and they developed a computer model using the U.S. Department of Energy software to determine that the proposed structure versus the existing structure will use 75% less energy, about 70% less water than the existing structures on a per square foot basis. In addition, one of the other things that kind of get left out of the equation is to build the site that we're proposing, we're having to tear down a number of structures and transfer those units off-site. The transfer and removal of TAUs is not a bad thing. These are blighted, overcovered, inefficient systems that exist all over Lake Tahoe. And the TAU transfer process was meant as a growth management strategy to get rid of the garbage before you build something new. Next, with regards to traffic and air quality, it's been discussed that TRPA has conducted 2 traffic studies using the traditional method, IT trip generation studies, as well as an alternative baseline method using the existing counts for normal conditions. Both studies confirm the project would reduce total vehicle trips and vehicle miles traveled. But beyond that, I want to just touch on a few safety factors that aren't included in that discussion that we've heard, but are inherent to the study that's in front of you. First, the alternative baseline conditions, by using that lower number, automatically assumes a permanent decline in the ability of gaming and casinos at Lake Tahoe to generate trips. It assumes about a 34% permanent reduction in the ability of casinos at Lake Tahoe to generate trips. Whereas when we look at the proposed condition, we use normal standard casino studies and casino trip generation rates that assume a fully healthy, fully sustainable casino that has no impact on travel gaming in California and is going gangbusters. So you have this kind of apples to oranges comparison there, where today we're admitting the effect of travel gaming with the alternative baseline. In the future, we say, well, that's gone. You guys are going to be operating. Again, a conservative analysis for you all to consider. Second, the trip generation study does not consider the elimination of trips under cumulative conditions from the basin due to the removal and tear down and restoration of the tourist accommodation units I just talked about. We completely ignore that. The study assumes or pretends like those motels and hotel units are still standing today on a cumulative basis in the basin. If we're able to look at the trip generation that's been eliminated and the DNP that's eliminated by the removal and restoration that's required by the project permit, that's approximately another 1,100 trips and about 9,000 vehicle miles traveled on a gross basis. And then finally, the alternative transportation program I'll talk to you a little bit about today, for both the existing and the proposed conditions, we assume the same 8% alternative mode trip calculation. So in a sense, we use the same percentage despite the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that would be invested in public transportation. There's really no benefit ascribed to that in the transportation system. And then finally, with regards to traffic, this is important because it's something that we worked on with Governor Brown's office when he was still the Attorney General of the state of California under the amendment to the Mariner Settlement. This is something that's never been proposed. It was a gap management strategy that we worked on creatively and cooperatively together to guarantee that our cumulative conditions, the amount of DMP and trips within the basin would go down. We agreed with the Attorney General's office that within 5 years of opening the project, we would conduct a vehicle count survey. If that vehicle count survey exceeded the forecasted trip, which is in our EIS, we would permanently retire development rights from within the basin to offset those trips. And then here is that alternative transportation program that we developed with the Kentucky North Tahoe Transportation Management Association. It's important to note this is not a proactive approach of the Boulder Bay project to be a participant in public transportation program at Lake Tahoe and was part of that CEP program. So again, the green building program combined with BMT reduction and alternative transportation results in significant environmental benefit in the furthering of the air quality pressure. Coming to an end, I know you have home. With regards to recreation and building on the North State Line Community Plan objective of creating a family-friendly, world-class destination resort, Boulder Bay project significantly increases the on-site recreation as we talked about earlier. We provide that 4-acre public park with capacity viewing areas built with $5 and maintained with $5 by a public park. And then just in terms of showing a comparison of the park that existed under the Order Settlement Agreement with what we're proposing, this is a view from the area that's allocated for the park today. Without amendment to the Mariner Settlement, you see the view of 28. To the right, you see a view of the casino park. And while a bit dark, these photographs show views from the proposed park site. So about 1.5 acres of flat viewing area with seating areas that afford views of Lake Tahoe, as well as the ski area across the lake, and the flume trail directly across the lake. And then the bottom picture is the view from the little 1/5 of a mile on the Turkey Trail. Not too many casino core community plans are going to have that kind of amenity offer. And then our third and final EIP project was a project that's identified in the North State Line Community Plan. It's the building of a state line mini park that welcomes people to both Nevada and California, and we'll be completing that project as part of the approved Boulder Bay project. So last, this again was an item that we worked on both with our neighbors across the street at Stillwater Cove, which is the homeowners association across the street, as well as with the Attorney General's office of the state of California. And it was really in response to the issue that we have on the South Shore with some of the partially completed projects. And we committed, and it's the first time ever that anyone's ever committed, to providing evidence of adequate construction financing prior to ever putting a shovel in the ground. We're not going to start until the bank has signed off on all the construction financing necessary to complete our project. We think that's an important commitment to make, and one that is worthy of making in recognition of the economic trouble we've seen in the past. So that's it. That's the end of my presentation. You have today an existing condition which maintains 5 significant and unavoidable impacts and moves us further away from threshold payment versus the proposed project, which has in the EIS demonstrates 19 significant benefits and moves us further towards the attainment of the air quality, soil conservation, water quality, and scenic thresholds benefits. Thank you very much.
Home stretch. We covered again on behalf of Boulder Bay. There are 2 issues that have garnered a lot of attention from lawyers other than myself. One is the potential height amendment. The second is the baseline characterization of traffic. First, I'll talk about the height amendment. We had several new phrases introduced, associated with height and community character. Code avoidance is a more recent concept that has become bannered about, and again, build baby build. As to community character, you saw pictures of Crystal Bay. The character of that community is inconsistent with the vision of the community plan. The character of that community is 4 sailing casinos, a 122-foot tower at the Calneva, and the curtain wall of development of the tower built more setback several feet, a few feet from State Route 28. The height amendment proposes to start to address the community character, to implement the vision of the community plan, to transition it to a family-friendly, recreation-oriented destination resort. I digress a minute, but, and probably should make this observation in the comments about traffic, but on the one hand, people have criticized us because they say this project cannot possibly succeed at Crystal Bay. It's just a wrong idea for the wrong place, and therefore you're going to build it, nobody will come. The other side 1991, Embassy Suites and the Ski Run Timeshare Hotel. In 1996, the Heavenly Village project. And in 1998, Project 3. Doesn't sound like real big deal to me. 4 projects in 25 years sounds like we have failed miserably to address the ills of the built environment. Having said that, Embassy Suites and Ski Run required the addition of Chapter 15 to the TRPA Code, which authorized 95 feet of height for Embassy Suites and 75 feet of height for the Ski Run Hotel. Again, because there was no variance procedure, the only method whereby this agency could approve that kind of development was by amending the code. Heavenly Village was similarly situated. By the way, these are all California projects, none of which enjoyed the existence of legally existing non-conforming height as a structured housing gaming. So this Nevada project that Tahoe built more at 76 feet under the TRPA compact could be demolished, reconstructed within its existing cubic volume to its existing height, to its existing coverage, without TRPA review or approval. Unlike the code revisions that occurred in California, where there was no pre-existing non-conforming height. It's a significantly different situation because you have this height that legally exists here, and I think that's important in your deliberations. It's also been celebrated recently that the League of Save Tahoe has supported the code amendments, additions for the Embassy Suites project at 95 feet and for the 73 feet of height for Heavenly Village, and yet they have been critical of Boulder Bay seeking, quite frankly, a level playing field to deal with an equally blighted condition in a different state, the reduced equivalent of its urban core. So the record, I think, is abundantly clear. The photographs speak for themselves. I struggle with the idea that nobody needs new improvements. They're stepping back, setting it back, having great alpine architecture, robust landscaping, can do anything other than dramatically improve the scenic quality from the travel route, which is what the science has demonstrated, and has almost brought the entire Crystal Bay community plan area into scenic attainment. 1.5 points upward on one side of the street. There's a half point remaining, and we hope we're the inspiration to our neighbors to complete the journey to complete threshold attainment. With respect to traffic, boy, can that be confusing or what? We have more ways to count cars than you have ways to count buoys. I'm just kidding. The TRPA code has, or the TRPA has consistently measured traffic by utilizing the trip tables from the ITE, Institute of Traffic Engineers program, to determine both existing and proposed traffic levels. And I would be disingenuous if I didn't say we had a serious problem because, as John Marshall alluded to earlier and we have discussed, this project, unlike all other projects, at least in my experience, was subject to a settlement agreement with California. And the Attorney General's office came to you when the draft environmental impact statement was released and said, you know what, we don't buy this way that you guys have done this historically. We want you to actually do another traffic study and determine what actual counts are. Quite frankly, from Boulder Bay's perspective, we didn't have any leverage because we didn't have a project that the California Attorney General's office did not sign on. So we did this alternative traffic analysis, measuring actual counts, and it still showed that there was reduction in traffic because the land uses have changed. And this should mean something to all of us here. We then were able to, in fact, execute not the third amendment to the settlement agreement, that too, but we also executed a second settlement agreement with the California Attorney General's office. So we did the two steps, you might say. We had to have a settlement agreement to allow us to move gaming off of State Route 28 and set it back and reduce it, that was the first step where we wouldn't have a project, and we were successful in entering into a settlement agreement with the Attorney General's office to accomplish that noble cause. And then more recently, to implement this traffic reduction program that I think is, in your experience, pretty unique. Ordinarily, we then forecast these strips and retire development, do whatever we need to do to create mitigation. Sometimes we implement alternative transportation methodologies. We did that at South Shore. We've done that here, but that wasn't the agreed upon process. The agreed upon process here was to say, hey, look, we're going to put a ceiling on your trip generation for Boulder Bay that's even lower than both of these traffic studies indicate. We're going to say you can't exceed 2,900 and change trips per day after build out. And if you do, we're going to monitor it. If you do 5 years later, then you have to retire existing development rights to offset that increase. And that is part and parcel of the Third Amendment to the settlement agreement. In other words, guaranteed trip reduction mitigation. No risk to the agency or to the public. That's pretty powerful, and I hope it's not precedent for future projects, but it's something that Boulder Bay has agreed to do. So, I have to make another observation here. We've been examined microscopically by TRPA staff, environmental consultants, our neighbors, other organizations, the League, the Sierra Club, and yesterday there was a new kid on the block, Earth Justice. And Earth Justice was also critical of the traffic analysis, arguing that there shouldn't have been an adjustment in the alternative study based on the greatest economic downturn in our lifetime. I'm almost at a loss. The criticism was that you shouldn't have adjusted the counts because of this great economic downturn. And I just have to read a short quote from the most recent California case, which, as most of you that are familiar with the litigation committee, particularly the finding of the TRPA, but sometimes we go to it for guidance. And in Sunnydale West Neighborhood Association versus City of Sunnydale, decided in December of 2010, the court said the word normally is used in procedural regulation. It's most reasonably understood as recognizing with respect to individual projects not previously analyzed that the physical conditions existing exactly at the time the notice of preparation is published or at the time the environmental analysis begins may not be representative of the general existing conditions, and therefore an agency may exercise its discretion to apply appropriate methodology to determine the baseline existing conditions. Thus, for example, if traffic congestion in vehicular traffic is temporarily decreased due to an unusually poor economy, so the traffic conditions at the time specified by CEQA Guidelines Section 15125 are inconsistent with the usual historic conditions, a lead agency, that would be you, might use appropriate methodology, perhaps historical data, which is exactly what our consultants did, and traffic modeling, which is exactly what our consultants did, to determine the generally existing conditions. So I think we have beat this to death. We've looked at it from both sides now, and if we're wrong, we have guaranteed the outcome. So, in conclusion, after all of this study, multiple settlement agreements, downsizing, and studies of studies, Boulder Bay is the first CEP project to be before you for action. Most have been unable to endure this process. And it's a fair question to ask, how are on a going forward basis property owners going to be able to make changes to their properties to implement the environmental benefits that we need. The recent hearings before the Nevada Senate Government Affairs Committee concerning SB 271, the bill to withdraw from TRPA, was voting members, regardless of state, the governing board member was appointed by the philosophical ties, because, quite frankly, and I mean this absolutely sincerely, if this project isn't good enough, we don't need to keep the lights on, because I don't know who's going to step up if we can't make this project happen. Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Brian. Madam Chair, I will now conclude today's presentation with a review of the proposed project's compliance with the CPP and regional plan requirements. I'll try to go through this fairly briskly. A complete review of the proposed project and code amendment in terms of the compliance with both the CEP and the regional plan was conducted. The proposed project, as presented by the applicant, must comply with the CEP resolution criteria, which you have a copy in the packet, and TRPA code and regional plan requirements, which I will briefly discuss in terms of the specific requirements and strategies for how they were being met. Next. This slide addresses scale, massing, height, and community character. The issue here, the proposed project calls for removing the existing building height from along State Highway 28 and setting it further back away from the highway. There are no concerns about relocating the existing casino structure to the upper slopes of the property due to the potential for the reduced visible impact seen from the lake. The strategy here, it is recognized that there is a need for some flexibility in allowing additional height specific to achieving the North State Line community plan vision and to achieve scenic threshold improvements, which you just heard about. The methodology for doing so. The proposed project therefore includes an amendment of Chapter 22 for additional building height, which is designed to remove the existing 76-foot height from along the highways, Highway 28, and moving it back away from the highway and upslope. The proposed project addresses the issues of scale, massing, height, and community character by providing a greater setback and use of landscape amenities. Continued strategies also include building articulation and graduated building heights, in addition to, like I said, providing landscape open space. Based on staff's review, the EIS analysis and the EIS analysis, the proposed project meets the CEP requirements and improves TRPA's scenic quality threshold. Land coverage reduction and water quality improvements. The issue. The proposed project must reduce the percentage of existing land coverage by a minimum of 5% per the North State Line community plan. In addition, the proposed density and height shall result in an overall result in land coverage as well. The strategy for doing so, the proposed project will reduce existing land coverage within the community plan by 15.8%, approximately 68,000 square feet, which exceeds the community plan coverage reduction goal by 10.8%. Methodology. Providing landscape pockets, planter beds, and open space, as well as implementing low-impact development identified as LID features, such as stormwater catchment systems on the roof, green roof systems, and pervious pavers, which you heard about earlier. Further, as a result of the LID water quality treatments, the proposed project is effectively designed to capture, convey, and infiltrate up to a 100-year one-hour storm total runoff. Based on staff's review, the proposed project exceeds CEP requirements for land coverage and water quality improvements. Next slide, please. EIP project improvements. The issue. CEP projects are required to commit to irrevocable commitments for substantial environmental improvements to include The strategy. Boulder Bay has completed the utility underground for EIP number 970 in advance of the project approval, which was the underlying of the overhead power utility lines. Boulder Bay has also committed with Placer County to fund a portion of EIP number 732, which is identified as the Rockaway Water Quality Improvement Project. Boulder Bay will construct the state line mini park with approval of the EIP project 114 as well. Based on these commitments, the proposed project complies with the CEP EIP requirements. Next slide, please. Transportation improvements. The issue. Boulder Bay must provide confirmation and commitments to include coordination and improvements of existing public transit components. The strategy. The proposed project includes alternative transportation plans, which include transit shelters, bus and shuttle turnouts, a financial subsidy to increase public transit service to the site, employee shuttles, car and bike share services, and shuttles for guests and other alternative transits to other amenities and beaches. Requirement. As a condition of approval, the permittee shall submit a monitoring plan to monitor the project's daily vehicle trip bans, consistent with the third amendment of the settlement agreement for the TRPA review and approval. Based on staff's review, the proposed project meets the CEP requirements for transportation improvements. Next slide, please. Settlement agreement. Issue. The proposed project includes the former Tahoe Mariner site. Development on these parcels is subject to a third amendment. The agreement defines the scope and the nature of development allowed on the parcel. The strategy. As Boulder Bay's proposed development is inconsistent with the terms set forth in previous settlement agreements, approval of the project requires an amendment to these agreements. Boulder Bay proposes to deed restrict and dedicate 5.7 acres of project area as open space and park property. As part of the 5.7 acres, Boulder Bay proposes to construct 2 community parks with lake views, hiking trails, water quality improvements, environmental interpretive installations, and public parking. Based on staff review, the proposed project meets CEP requirements related to the amending of the settlement agreement. Next slide, please. Compliance with TRPA code and regional plan, specifically proposed height amendment. The issue is the proposed project includes buildings that will exceed maximum allowable height limits as established in Chapter 22 of the existing Code of Ordinances. The strategy. To address the building height issue, the project includes an amendment of the Chapter 22 Code of Ordinances to allow additional height in portions of the North State Line Community Plan. I guess I would use section 22.4E, which you probably have a copy of in front of you in your packets. The additional height allowed by the proposed code amendment is limited to a maximum of 75 feet, or 3/4 of the height of the tallest trees within the project area, whichever is lower. The proposed project height is limited to 58 feet for structures set back a minimum of 4 feet from the highway in SR 28, 67 feet for structures set back 60 feet, and 75 feet for structures set back a minimum of 180 feet. While the amendment is conditioned on achieving increased reductions in land coverage, that's an important part. Based on staff's analysis, the proposed code amendment complies with the code and regional plan. The project review process also included a complete review of the proposed project for compliance with the regional plan and the Code of Ordinances. This slide indicates some of the key issues related to the Boulder Bay project. Land use. All proposed land uses are permissible uses within the community plan, with the exception of the multifamily residential component, which requires special use use findings, which the rationale for making these findings can be found in your staff summary. Located in your packet. Site development. The proposed land coverage reduction totaling 15.8% exceeds both the CEP and the community plan requirements. The proposed project complies with proposed height amendments when adopted, and the project complies with the density requirements required in Chapter 21 of the current code. Transfer of development. Under the CEP program, the Boulder Bay project was eligible to receive tourist accommodation units, residential units, and commercial floor area as incentives to provide additional environmental improvements. The result, the Boulder Bay project has been assigned 40 bonus TAUs from Special Project Pool and 31 bonus TAUs from the North State Line Community Plan. The Boulder Bay project elected not to request CFA through this program, the CEP program. Finally, all units of use are either being relocated on-site or transferred from off-site locations, with the transferred sites being restored consistent with the Code Chapter 34. Required findings. The list of findings and supporting rationale for making the findings for certifying the FEIS, adopting the proposed code amendment, and approving the proposed project are included in attachments B1, B2, and B3, which I identified earlier in your staff summary in your packet. Based on the FEIS analysis, the proposed project and the proposed code amendment have been determined by staff to comply with the code and the regional plan. At the March 9, 2011 Advisory Planning Commission public hearing, staff requested that the Advisory Planning Commission hold a public hearing to make a recommendation to the TRPA Boulder Board of technical adequacy and a recommendation for certification of the final environmental impact statement. Adoption of the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Code of Ordinance to allow additional height for the designated special projects in the North State Line Community Plan, and a finding that the proposed project is consistent with the FEIS and in compliance with the Community Enhancement Program requirements. Following the public hearing, staff is requesting that the governing board act on the following matters: certification of the final EIS, amendment of Chapter 22 of the Code of Ordinances, and approval of the proposed Boulder Bay Community Enhancement Program project based on a minor plan revision to Special Condition Y in your staff summary. Special condition 5Y requires that all parties of the 1981 settlement agreement sign the new settlement agreement. And as a result of some of the parties being deceased, this would not actually be an appropriate condition of approval, and so staff is asking the governing board to amend that particular amendment before approving.
We're on page 213.
I beg your pardon. So the current code reads, the current special condition 5Y reads, the permittee shall provide to TRPA signed copies of the amended single Tahoe Mariner settlement agreement that amends both the 2001 agreements and the California agreements. The amendment should be signed by all parties to the original 1981 agreement and be approved by the United States District Court for the District of Nevada. So what the staff is proposing is the striking of the sentence, second sentence of that special condition.
I'd like to just note this was an oversight. We could have approved to start this, and it didn't get edited out. This was something the council had reviewed and okayed, and it was simply oversight for the packet.
So Chair, that concludes the staff presentation of the Boulder Bay CED project. If you wish now, and if you think it's appropriate, to break for lunch and open up the public hearing after lunch, I send it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Landry, for a very comprehensive report and our presentation. And I think it would be wise if you go for lunch. I'm looking at 12:56 at this time. We will be going in, the board will be having a working lunch in closed session. That will be in the room where the legal committee met, is that correct?
Correct.
So that's up a little ways and it'll be the first door on your right, is that correct? All right. So, with that, we will break for lunch. I am, Joanne, are we going to be back exactly an hour, or do we need to make it?
Well, we will certainly make our most earnest attempt to be back in an hour, so I would make it meeting two. The other thing is you need a motion to go into closed session.
Okay. Before I do that, so the plan would be to reconvene at 2 o'clock to start public comment. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. A motion, second,